Hello and welcome to our webinar. This is Terri Roberts with DMAI, and we're so pleased to have you here again this month. And if you're joining us for the first time in our webinar series, welcome. We hope to have a great offering for you today. We want to just get a few little housekeeping notes out of the way. First of all, you can familiarize yourself on your GoToMeeting dashboard with your question box. And there, our colleague, Christine Shimasaki, we call her Shimo, will be monitoring any questions that you have. So if you want to ask a question as it comes to top of mind and just put it in there, Shimo will hold the questions and then elaborate at the end. So we'll be funneling them and putting them together and hopefully having a good group of questions at the end. So feel free to ask. Also feel free to comment. Shimo's always loving to see and put together comments as we go as well. So welcome to same meeting, plus different destination does not equal the same meeting. 5 things you must consider when your meeting rotates. And we're excited to have quite a few of you with us this morning. We hope and think that you found this as compelling a subject as we did. I'd like to welcome our panelists today, our good friend Nelson Fabian, who's the president for the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting Institute. And Nelson, I don't want to date you here, but your bio actually says that you have planned and been responsible for meetings for almost 4 decades. So we know you're using a glamour shot there. But Nelson, for 32 years, I know you were the CEO of the National Environmental Health Association and that you currently have the role of president at the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting Institute. But you also sit on 9 different CBB customer advisory boards, including DMAI's industry level advisory board, and you really have a very keen and particular interest in how DMOs can really be a richer resource for meeting planners and the meetings they create. So I welcome you. I thank you for being, Nelson, a good friend of our industry and really being committed to communicating how we can be better partners for each other.
Thank you.
All right, so this is kind of our roadmap. We're going to just start by giving a little bit of information about how the decision, how the destination really influences the decision to attend, kind of as a little backdrop of information. And then follow that up with 5 things we hope you will consider and 1 person we hope you will know. So Nelson and I built this webinar around the idea that destinations can enhance, impact, and even really, as Nelson tries to coin, differentiate a meeting. So a destination is just not the venue that you plop your meeting in. So we hope to tap into this idea a little bit more with you today and raise awareness of how you can take advantage of the destination you meet in on a real, on a more granular level. And, actually, Nelson, I think you were the one that said it really, what a destination actually has to offer can be a major consideration ultimately for selecting one destination over another. So I know, Nelson, you made a comment about the focus of planners. I wonder if you'd like to share that with our audience.
No, sure, I'm happy to. And good morning, everybody. It's a delight to be with you here today. Over my experience, I like to think of meeting planners as one of 2 types. There's the internally focused meeting planner whose mission in life is to make sure that their meetings go smoothly, flawlessly, that the conduct of the meeting is great. And then there are the externally focused meeting planners who have that big picture in mind. They're the ones who are trying to build positive slopes in their meetings from year to year and create a meeting experience that will bring customers back in future years. If you're talking about a captive meeting where you're involving, I don't know, staff, distributors, customers, the meeting doesn't change much from year to year. Thank God you have an internally focused meeting planner because they're the ones who are going to make it work. But if you have to compete for attendees, like I've had to do over my career, I'm really happy to have an externally focused meeting planner on my staff, because I need them to bring in the extras. I need them to have ideas on how you can expand that meeting beyond the boundaries of logistics and simply content. And when you're talking about bringing in extras, you're talking also about bringing in the features of a destination, its resources, ways in which you can get people to taste the community that they're meeting in. And I really do think that's a meeting enhancement.
Absolutely, Nelson. And so now let's kind of continue and talk about maybe what some of those extras look like and how we hope that your CVB will be that source for tapping into that potential. So I want to give a little background information kind of to set the stage for our premise here. And we did a webinar back in August of 2015 called The Decision to Attend. And it was based off the study of the same name by IAEE, PCMA, and the Experience Institute's collaboration. So I want to let you know that if you want a little bit more about this, I'm going to give a very broad brush, but in our follow-up email, we're going to send you a link to the Decision to Attend study, and we're also going to send you a link to that recording of our webinar from August if we whet your appetite to learn a little bit more. So the Decision to Attend actually surveyed a little over 7,000 responses from current and potential attendees, and it examined really the reasons individuals chose to attend or not attend a convention that was being held by a collaboration of about 10 different organizations. So it really pulled in a wide variety of professions and industries. So the goal of this study was to go beyond kind of the traditional group profile and start adding some behavioral data. And while education certainly remains the highest rated attendance driver, 82% of respondents indicated the importance of the destination in which the meeting was being held as a primary driver. So I think that's a remarkable number, 82%. The write-in comments in the survey ran the gamut from destination appeal to how drivable a destination was, to airlift, to overall cost, to walkability. And then attendees started to make a lot of comments that made the survey owners say, wow, it's really amazing how much meeting attendees are beginning to behave like leisure travelers, and how important the rotation and experiencing new places matters to that meeting attendee. So overall then, 30% say that the location of the meeting actually determines whether or not they decide to attend. So I think we can walk away from this at a very broad brush saying that the destination definitely impacts the decision to attend and may even encourage those who are attending to attend more frequently, or those who are infrequent attendees to become excited about your meeting. So Nelson and I hope to take a little goal or a little look at how the goal of your meeting, the value of your meeting, the preparation of your RFP to be destination specific can be the baseline, and then you can get into assessing the destination's resources, and then as Nelson is quite passionate about, assessing the destination's intellectual capital through hopefully the help and support of your destination consultant. So given your awareness of the field, Nelson, do you feel like this is a direction that you see most planners and most meetings traveling in?
Well, I definitely see an interest on the part of meeting planners in how destinations differ and how they can impact their meetings. What I wish I saw more of was more interest in how you can actually incorporate a destination into your meeting. Let me give you an example, a quick example of what I'm talking about. I recently had the opportunity to read a debrief that was published by PCMA on their meeting in Vancouver. And I was, to be honest, somewhat taken aback by the fact that in assessing their conference, they didn't make any mention of how Vancouver had impacted it, nor was there any consideration published over how they can take advantage of Austin next year to enhance their meeting. And keep in mind, PCMA is a highly regarded, and for all the right reasons, professional society of meeting planners. It was disappointing to me that I wasn't seeing more attention being given to how to take advantage of a destination's resources to enhance that meeting experience.
Pretty interesting, Nelson. So let's go through our 5 points and start. We'll kind of spend increasingly more time on each point. So number 1, I think that this point might seem obvious to most people, but how does the overall goal of the meeting, like before you even really think about going out there and sourcing the meeting, how does the overall goal of the meeting inform the meeting location?
Okay, let me talk from my personal experience. When I plan a meeting, I want to get my hands on as many assets as I can. Examples of assets include sponsorship dollars, top-notch speakers, classy hotel, that kind of stuff. And then I arrange those assets as best I can to maximize their contribution to the goals of my meeting. I contend that the destination is an incredibly important asset for a meeting because think about it, it gifts to your attendees one of the things that people crave, which is that sense of place, that sense for place. You can honor that desire that people have by bringing the destination into your meeting such that when people leave your meeting, they know they've been there. I mean, we don't hold our meetings at hotels or convention centers. We hold our meetings in Chicago, in Washington, in Boston, or wherever. And given this desire for sense of place, I want to make sure that I address that with my meetings, because if I can succeed doing that, I've created a driver for return business. And when you're talking about goals, I don't know about our audience this morning, but that's one of the most important goals that I have, especially in organizations that are not-for-profit in nature.
Well taken. I love some of the words, Nelson, that you're using. Sense of place, honoring desires, the destination kind of being a gift to attendees. Very cool. And also I think too that depending on the type of meeting, whether it's very educational in orientation or perhaps very recreational or networking in orientation, the destination can actually include some things that enhance, or in sometimes when poorly chosen, a destination can provide almost from the beginning some obstacles that you end up having to work around. So Nelson, the second thing we talked about was why is it important to really know the detailed financials of your meeting beyond just rates, dates, and space, and how they change as your meeting moves to different locations?
Sure. Great question, and I think it's a very important one for meeting planners in increasingly responsible positions. I've always required my meeting programs to know how our conference finances vary by destination. Okay, why is that important? Because if you have that knowledge, then you're in a position to make data-driven business decisions when it comes to site selections. And as an executive director CEO, I want that increased probability that I'm going to have a successful meeting when I next hold a conference, because that profit means an awful lot to my organization. In the not-for-profit world, we run on very thin margins. Therefore, every time we can make money, it's really important to be able to sustain our organization. So by knowing the finances of my conference, by knowing the totality of the finances of my conference and how they change by destination, it puts me in a much better position to make site selection decisions down the road. There's one other thing I would add too, and I think most of our attendees this morning already know this, but I'll say it anyway. Knowing the financial value of your meeting also enhances your negotiating position when you're working with hotels and other elements of the hospitality community in negotiating contracts, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, Nelson. And to that point, your CVB partner can specifically help you with some tools like the Event Impact Calculator to really understand, not guess, but really understand the value of a meeting specific to the destination, even down to your tax contributions and, many of the granular areas of your meeting as well. So that kind of leads us to question number 3. Nelson, you and I had talked about this, and you kind of said you would ask me this question, right?
Yes, I absolutely. You come from the DMO industry and have a bank of expertise to be able to speak to a question like this. So I was curious, how can you help a meeting planner develop an RFP that's really destination specific?
Well, good question, Nelson. And I kind of think I see 2 things happening. I see planners really taking a lot of time to make sure that their RFP is destination specific, and then I see those kind of going blind, right? And it is really important to, before you send the RFP, to make yourself knowledgeable and aware of, what are the destination's demand factors? Historically, the time of year that your meeting occurs, what is their demand? In the year, for the year, what are they seeing? What are the trends happening in that marketplace in terms of rate and occupancy? How is transient occupancy impacting group meeting ceilings? What special events may be happening in the destination that are going to impact availability and therefore perhaps you getting good responses. Even things like seasonality, we can make some, I guess, broad brush assumptions about seasonality, thinking, oh, this will be a low time for a particular destination, when in fact maybe counterintuitively they have something going on in the destination that is really driving demand over what would typically be seen as a downtime, like a holiday. So I always encourage planners not to send blind RFPs, but to have a conversation with a destination expert to say, educate me about the demand factors of your particular destination over the dates of my meeting so that I can finesse it before I send it.
Well said.
So, Nelson, we kind of talked about 2 things, and we'll spend the rest of our time really concentrating in on these. So you mentioned that planners kind of have 2 levels of access to the destination. Number 1, how do you access the destination's resources? And in the phase 2 of the decision to attend, DMOs and meeting professionals are sitting down with what we call a behavioral profile template, where they're really looking at their attendees demographically and they're kind of matching them up with destination assets. So you give me some of your own personal experience about tapping into destination resources.
Yeah, I see 2 levels where meeting planners can access a destination and use it to enhance their conference. And on this particular agenda item, we're talking about how meeting planners can access resources in a community to help make the meeting experience more rich for the attendee. And when we were talking in prep for this meeting, Terri, you had asked me the question, do I see a lot of planners doing this, a few planners doing this? Well, notwithstanding my earlier comments about PCMA, I'm actually quite positive on this point in regards to the fact that I think most of the meeting planners I know do make the effort to examine a destination and identify venues that they can use for social events, off-site events, that sort of thing. I think they do that pretty well. In regards to the point you make, the important point you make about having a sense for the character, the personality, the demographics of your group, I think that's very, very important, because in selecting resources in the community to use to hold, say, for instance, a special event or something like that, that's really the end product of a good collaboration between the meeting planner and the DMO or the DMC or some other third party, where you're examining the character, the profile of a group, and making sure that it aligns with the kinds of venues that you're considering for your events. I mean, for instance, I don't think if you're representing a group of animal rights advocates that you would take a social event to a bullfighting arena.
Right, in its most extreme, yes, exactly.
Right.
It's tapping into who are my attendees, what are they really, like what is their desire to tap into in a destination, and then having the resources to highlight the appropriate things at the appropriate time.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nelson, then you say, well, then there's another level. There's a whole nother level of accessing the destination's intellectual capital. So the first is just offerings, right? I want to make sure that it happens, all the destination has to offer that my attendees might be interested in. But then there's this whole much deeper level of how do I access the destination's intellectual capital to truly differentiate my meeting. So I guess I want to first ask you to kind of define intellectual capital and then give an example of how you've seen this come to fruition and really work in a destination.
Sure. More than happy to. In fact, if this was a visual conference, you'd see this gigantic grin on my face right now, because indeed this is not only something I feel very passionate about, but it also made it very easy to say yes to your invitation to be with you this morning, because this is such an important issue. Okay, to answer your question first, intellectual and human capital, it refers to the knowledge, the expertise, experience, and knowledge assets of a community. And knowledge assets include everything from patents to libraries, museums, even copyrights, and other results of human innovation and thought. In Cleveland, for instance, it includes the remarkable expertise of the medical community, including the famous Cleveland Clinic. In San Jose, it includes the experience of technology disruptors and innovative enterprises. In Calgary, it includes the knowledge of the energy industry and even insights into alternative forms of energy. The basic idea here, and from a meeting planner's perspective, is that when you go to a destination, you are also looking at a treasure trove of expertise and knowledge and innovation and intellectual assets that are actually available to you in your meeting. And it's possible to pull them into your event and in the process, I don't know, outlandishly, let's say, enhance the meeting experience of your attendees. Terri, you've asked me to give you some examples, and I'm more than happy to do that. But first, let me take just a minute to explain from my perspective why this is so important to meeting planners and DMOs. And I say this because what we're talking about is something that goes far beyond just meetings. Economic development, and especially job creation, is one of the highest priorities in America today. I know this in part because I study the budgets of cities and counties for a living. Except for public safety, there is no higher priority across American cities today than economic development. It's all about what can we do to create jobs. And for my DMO friends on this call, I would be happy to talk to you offline, because your work in economic development should be netting you greater funding, greater public funding for your bureaus, and I can actually help you on that front. But back to my main point, new jobs today, they're not coming from commodities or from the manufacturing center, from the manufacturing industry. They're coming from the creative economy which draws from the intellectual capital that communities have. In other words, accessing and building intellectual capital is where the action is. It's where the healthy cities in America are, and it's where the poor cities are aspiring to get to. And it's where future economic development is going to come from. My contention is that meeting planners can be heroes to their members and their attendees by drawing the destinations that you're going to, by drawing the destination's intellectual capital into your conference experience. And more, I'm happy to say, more and more DMOs are getting involved in helping meeting planners do just this. Think about
so Nelson, give me some examples.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I know you have some interesting examples.
Okay, I'm happy to. Detroit's DMO did a tremendous job this summer in conjunction with the ASAE conference when they opened up a slate of what they called edu-tours. These were tours which were made a part of the conference curriculum, and they involved taking attendees directly to specific sites in town to see firsthand how various creative enterprises in Detroit were rebuilding that city. Attendees, I would call, learned from the Detroit Historical Museum how to do fundraising. They learned how to align people with technology at General Motors. They learned about innovation and idea creation at Henry Ford Hospital, and so on. And I need to say, the evaluations after that conference were stellar. People loved it. In fact, the Detroit CVB said afterwards that they were going to get into the business of helping meeting planners access their intellectual capital as a differentiator for the city as it contends and competes with other cities for convention business. Another example, Calgary's DMO has created an intellectual capital initiative. The DMO there is now actively working on connecting meeting planners with leaders in energy, finance, technology, transportation, and even film. I got a kick out of the fact that Fargo, maybe some of you are watching that show on television, is actually filmed in and around Calgary. And also what's interesting is the DMO there wants to see ideas and innovations coming from these efforts that will change the world. That's their official slogan for this campaign of theirs called Capital Initiative, Intellectual Capital Initiative. Cleveland's creating a niche for itself as a home for world-class medical meetings. They've created an actual program complete with its own building. They've built a building, for crying out loud, that they call the Global Center for Health Innovation. That's a physical campus next to the convention center that local experts, doctors, scientists, and academics come to share knowledge across multiple medical and scientific disciplines that are meeting in the city. Melbourne has committed itself to being an intellectual capital. Those are the words they use. And the DMO there has launched a campaign called Melbourne IQ, the Intelligent Choice for Conferences. And the actual mission of this program that the DMO is driving is to connect local intellectual capital with conference attendees who are meeting in their city. And they're focusing on transforming ideas into innovations, which again is, as I said before, where the action is. Even Phoenix is working now with the Phoenix Biomedical Campus and Arizona State University to lift out of it intellectual capital that it can share with attendees conducting their meetings in the city of Phoenix. There are many more examples, but I think these make clear the point that movement is taking place where DMOs are becoming gatekeepers, enabling meeting planners to access the intellectual capital that exists in their communities and bring them into the meetings that the meeting planners are holding. And the question that I ask is, where else can an attendee have such an experience? And if attendees can have these kinds of experiences at the meetings that they're attending, I think you have built an enormously successful business model that enables you to hold on to and even expand your attendance in years to come, make your meetings more relevant, and make your associations or organizations more relevant as well.
You know, Nelson, I think you make a pretty compassionate argument. Like, it's really exciting to think about opening up doors for these kinds of conversations. And that's, I think, the purpose of our webinar today is to inspire perhaps the planners who have joined us, to those who will listen to our webinar recording, to say, I want to start having some of these conversations with my DMO, with my CBB in the destination, and start generating ideas for pulling from industry clusters, from prominent business and industry, where possible, to collaborate to really maximize attendance, have greater interest, and have really interesting meeting focus. So I can't thank you enough for kind of providing, maybe just scratching the surface of getting people excited about this idea.
Hallelujah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Terri, can I just very quickly add one more point? If your DMO is not into that, ask him to get into that, because this is where the future is. Push them, and I think you'll see some very acceptable results.
Yeah, I agree. You know, there are obviously some cities that are on the cutting edge or on the forefront of this, and if the particular city that you're working with hasn't made an entree here, your request to do so might be the first to really open some interesting doors. In that regard, we hope that the planners who have joined us, who are looking for a DMO CBB partner, can find 150 of our premier destinations who are vested in the meetings marketplace at one portal, empowerMINT.com. That's our industry portal, and you can get in contact with the right folks there to begin your discussion. I know that all of our participants today are usually interested in their CMP credit. You have earned a half an hour in Domain H, which is site management, and you will see your certificate in an email along with our webinar recording delivered to you early next week. Be checking that spam filter, because that's very often where our email ends up. Shimo, I know, has been putting together some of your questions for Nelson, and we'll go to her in just a minute. But before we do, I'd like to introduce Chris Wessel. Chris is with ePro Direct and is our monthly sponsor. Chris, so glad to have you with us, and wondering if you might just take a moment of introduction and tell our planners a little bit about ePro.
Yep, I'd love to, Terri. And first of all, I can't tell you how much we value our partnership with you folks. It's just been an awesome ride, and we're looking forward to many, many more sponsorship opportunities with you. And second of all, how do I possibly follow Nelson? I mean, Nelson, seriously, what a great, fresh way of looking at things when considering a destination. I mean, it's, I was thinking about it as you were talking about it, and real quick, people take vacations on their own time, and it's not often that they want to incorporate an educational component to their vacations. They want to go, they want to relax. So I almost look at this as, like you said, what a great opportunity for attendees to not only attend hopefully a great conference, but to also have some education behind that, in other areas of what they, something that they may not even do. So it's almost like taking advantage. I would want to go to a conference strictly for that reason, because it may not be something I might not do that if I was on vacation with my family or my spouse or whatever it might be. So just great insight. Thank you so much for the information. I'm sure everybody appreciated it as much as I did. But my name's Chris, as Terri mentioned, and I am one of the co-founders of a company called ePro Direct. We're a marketing agency. We've been around for about 15 years. We primarily do a lot of work with hotels and other types of meeting suppliers and many associations, primarily doing a lot of email marketing initiatives. So we are an outsourced opportunity for associations that don't have the bandwidth or the manpower to manage their email marketing campaigns. That's our first and foremost. And then about 5 years ago, we started developing event apps when we saw an opportunity there. And we fortunately have a database of about 80,000 meeting and event planners, and we kind of did a survey to those planners, asking them, and we continuously do them, asking them what they would like in an event app, and features and functionality and price points and all that kind of thing, and that's pretty much what we deliver. So we do have kind of a leg up on competitors, where we are constantly uncovering what's most important to the planner community when it comes to event apps. So been doing that for about 5 years. We're a one-price cross-platform, which means you pay one low price, and it runs across multiple platforms. And really, where most of the feedback came from so many of the planners was that they needed the process to be very simple, that this was an additional task that meeting planners would be taking on. It didn't really replace anything. And that's really where we put most of our effort. So not just on a customer service level, but on a development level and everything else. We try to copy companies in a way, other companies outside the industry that just make a process very, very simple to accomplish the goal that they have set. So if anyone has any questions or would like to chat about the possibility of an event app or even outsourcing your email marketing, if that's something that you're struggling with or that's a challenge for you, you can reach out to me at chris.wesel@eprodirect.com or just visit us at eprodirect.com.
Thank you, Chris. And again, we really appreciate your sponsorship and your continued support. So we'll turn to Shimo now. And Shimo, I know that you have been collecting some possible questions for Nelson.
Yes, thank you so much. And there's been a number of questions coming from both planners and CVBs. So let me see. And some of them are kind of similar. So Nelson, let me see if I can kind of present some of them for you to answer.
Okay.
So first of all, you've been speaking about assets of the destination, and I think we have traditionally thought of those assets as the space and place, right? In terms of hotels and other amenities, restaurants that are all in every destination. But
yes,
you're talking about maybe something in terms of intellectual capital that is related to industries. But what you're suggesting is it not go beyond industries when you speak of intellectual capital, that you're actually connecting something beyond just the industry to.
Oh, absolutely.
So help our planners and CVBs understand that distinction a little.
Sure. Let me take a crack at it. The intellectual capital isn't housed in any particular place. It is the aggregate of the expertise, experience, knowledge, innovations, etc., that exists in the community. And communities tend to differentiate themselves by the type of communities they are. For instance, Calgary does have a standing as an energy town, as does Houston, for instance, and even Denver, for that matter. Los Angeles, of course, has intellectual capital that tends to be more weighted toward the entertainment industry for obvious reasons and so forth. But more to your question, the particulars of your question, as I understand it, we're not talking about anything that's siloed in one place. Intellectual capital spans across academia, private sector, government, non-for-profits. It's the aggregate of everything that exists. If say, for instance, I had a peculiar fascination, or my association had a peculiar fascination with the way government works, going to a place like Washington, D.C., and please don't laugh at me or something like that, but perhaps inviting somebody from OMB, or better put, taking a group of people over to OMB to get a sense for how they measure efficiency in government, that could be an interesting experience. My point is simply that we're not confining intellectual capital to the private sector or any particular industry. It's the summation of all the knowledge that exists in the community. And one last quick point, communities are getting better at branding themselves in that way too, taking advantage of that.
And so great, because I think this leads into the next sort of observation someone had, is that, and this is from one of the CVBs, that their planners aren't asking them for that, right? So
Yes.
what suggestions do you have in terms of presenting it to planners when they're not asking it, but helping them with this, what you call maybe the external focused view for the planners and what they're thinking about? How can this be presented, and what language would you use?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I don't know who submitted it, but thank you. That's just a super question, because I think this question holds within it the potential for actually pushing the meeting planning profession to think more broadly and widely as to how they can enhance the meetings that they're responsible for. I wish I knew how the idea of these edu-tours emerged in the collaboration between ASAE and the Detroit CVB long before the ASAE conference there last August. I don't know if it was Detroit who suggested that to ASAE or if it was ASAE that asked about it. But what I do know is the outcome. I do know that the Detroit CVB was so pleased with the rousing, raving reviews that it got for opening up the intellectual capital of that city that they committed themselves now to using this practice of theirs as a differentiator among, or I should say within the CVB world as cities compete for convention business. In terms of who should start the conversation, especially if the meeting planner doesn't, I don't think that there are many meeting planners out there who aren't interested in learning about how they can make their meetings better. I see no downside to a DMO, for instance, in bringing the issue up and saying, you know, we don't know how you create your program, but if you're interested in accessing some of the intellectual capital that exists in my city, we can be an asset to you. And I would even go so far as to say that conversation should take place prior to the RFP process. Because in my case, if I know that a DMO is willing to commit resources to that kind of an activity, I'm here to tell you that that city goes on my list of potential destinations that I want to look at. So it doesn't hurt for the DMO to take the first step, even if the meeting, it doesn't occur to the meeting planner to ask the question.
And I think that you kind of make a really interesting point there about, you know, this really does actually get in a conversation that should differentiate, and that is part of the RFP process and could be added. So, you know, one example about putting two and two together, and I think that is what planners are looking to the CVBs for, and what CVBs are looking to serve their communities, is to put two and two together, right? And one example that I've seen to add to your repertoire of all these great examples, Nelson, is when risk and insurance management, or they're now called RIMS, met in Denver. So putting two and two together, understanding that, you know, there's risk managers coming to Denver, and what would they be interested in about Denver? Well, putting together the recent legalization of marijuana, right, would be an interesting topic for risk managers. And I think that is another really great, insightful way that DMOs and planners can all work together. So that was a very popular education session for RIMS and their meeting in Denver.
I imagine it would be. You know,
so Terri, I think we go on and on about this topic, and I think we should probably explore in a future education session about these edu tours, because I think, you know, the whole notion about creativity, Nelson, is that it's often it's not clear cut, right? It's often messy in the beginning, but we're looking to continue to explore this topic and how we can help planners with their meetings, the success of their meetings. So Terri, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Well, maybe we lost Terri in all of that, Nelson. But
no,
nonetheless,
okay, I had myself muted because I was coughing. All right, and so then I started talking without unmuting myself.
It's not very often that Terri is silent, so
that's right. And you didn't lose. Yeah, you didn't lose me. But I just was saying thank you to Nelson, obviously to Chris and ePro. But I know this webinar probably wasn't as clean as a little checklist, but hopefully what it does is, especially on this whole subject of intellectual capital, is it just begins to get some wheels turning about having conversations, about connecting with DMOs, not only for what activities, what sort of social things that, you know, whether it's food and beverage or arts and culture or all of those things that we enjoy both as leisure and meetings travelers, but now to go, like Shimo said, what is it my attendees have interest in that this destination might have a reputation for and I might be able to source as an educational component of my meeting. So thank you, Nelson, for inspiring us. It was delightful to work with you, and we, again, are very indebted to your interest in our industry and making both DMOs and meeting professionals better partners for each other.
Thank you, Terri.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.